What's up, everyone? Jake from West Coast Sailing here with a pro tutorial to make you go faster. This week we talk tuning guides. Okay, here we go. How to use a tuning guide. So most people think that using a tuning guide is like having the holy grail of making your boat go fast standing right in front of you. And I think that it's more of a reference point. It's a good basic reference point to get you started and on the pace. It may not be your final product of what you use as your tuning guide, but it's a great place to get started. So what are the things that we're going to need? We're going to need some tools, anything you're going to need to be able to move your mast around within your boat. Sometimes it's wrenches, screwdrivers. If you've got a development class dinghy that allows you to pull a string to move your mast around, that's awesome. But some boats, if you're working on a bigger boat, you may need some wrenches and things. I always keep a 100-foot measuring tape with both imperial and metric units. That way I can go for different guides. Some people use different units for different things. And if you have the tools that allow you to use both types of any type of measuring unit, that's a great thing to have in your toolbox. Which type of gauge you're going to use? Lose gauges have been super popular over the years. If you're doing a bigger boat that has a mast jack, that's another great reference point to have as part of your tuning guide. So any equipment that you're going to use to measure tensions, you're going to need that tuning guide. That's going to be your reference point. That's what we're going to start working off of to get going faster. And your notebooks. The most important thing you can have is your notebook. I always like to keep two, a small all-weather notebook so I can take notes on the water, and I keep a big notebook in my toolkit or on land where I make a lot of detailed notes with a lot of detailed reference points within them. So getting started, you can see these guys have some tools. They got some measuring devices and they're getting after it on their boat. So the first thing I like to do is find a reference. If you have a good tuning guide, it should tell you where you need to start. So where are you measuring from? What units are you working in? And what do you measure first? Coming up with a good marking system and good marking strategy is also really important before you get started. Whether you're going to use tape or markers, whipping time, some paint, just have an idea of how you're going to make marks, where you're going to put them, and keeping them symmetric side to side. I really encourage you to find a buddy with another boat where you guys can set up your markings exactly the same so you can have great discussions on the water. Here's some reference points that we all have with boats. Some of these are great examples, and you can look over some other boats in the boatyard and figure out what guys are doing and what may work best for you. So finding base. Some people talk about base different ways. I encourage you to look at the guide and figure out what their base is and find out which one you think may work best for you. As you can see very clearly, this one has a base setting for 11 to 12 knots, and it has those measurements, tensions, and reference points within them. Good things to have for your base are a mast butt measurement, mast rig tension, and some sail selection or trim notes. So recording your data is really, really important, and having those data points be easily replicated are really important. This is an example of a tuning guide that has a lot of reference point. It has a wind range followed by the uppers tension and the lowers tension. And then that next section that says uppers is the amount of turns that it is from base. That's going to be your on the water adjustments, or those turns for this particular guide. It's got some spaces for notes and then some other sail settings beyond them. This is just another example. This is the Quantum Sails FAR 40 guide, where it has a lot of really specific measurements, really specific tensions and pressures. So this is just another example of a really detailed off-the-water tuning guide that may be just a bit too much information than you want on the water, which we're going to talk about next. So your on-the-water tuning guide, what a lot of people call it is a tuning matrix or a tuning grid, is something that you actually keep in your boat that has your simple reference points and your simple adjustments to make on the water. There's not a lot of excess information in here. It's very, very simple stuff for your crew to perform, for you to talk about, and to give you an easily referenced guide for some given conditions. Keep this along with your small notebook so that you can write down the conditions that you're in and what setting you're working on from your tuning matrix. All right, time to go sailing. There's a couple ways that you can do this. If you have two boats with the same setup, that's probably the best way to go about finding out what actually works fastest. You have a reference boat and another boat that makes changes. And that is a really great way to get very quantifiable data about what works for a given condition. And the other method, if you're on the race course and you want to be as fast as the fastest guy on the water, or whoever you think is the fastest person on the water, go line up with that faster boat and ask questions about what settings that they're on and try and reference those things to your settings and your markings. See if you can translate what they have into your boat so that you can go faster too. Some tricks: use some good long runway and lots of space between the boats. Another thing is to go for a good amount of time. 30 seconds isn't really long enough for you to get settled and really get going. You want to think in spans of 2 minutes or longer. Sail normal is a phrase that I like to use as VMG sailing. Don't be too bow down trying to go too fast. Don't be pinching up trying to pinch off the guy above you. You know, you're here to learn. It's not about the competition yet. Hopefully you're not racing while you're trying to tune. You should just be out there trying to tune and trying to learn. So sail normal and figure out what the fastest setting is for a given condition. And always be open with your information. Ask a lot of questions, and if people ask you questions, be free and open about giving it away. If you make somebody faster, odds are if they figured something out, they're going to translate it to you. So just be open with your information. We're all here to have fun and learn and get better. So getting results and making changes. Having the discussion is really important. And the other thing that's really important to make that discussion effective is taking really good notes. So if you make up a setting, you should take some notes on what you did. So where did you start? What did you change? That's how you're going to figure out things that did work, didn't work. When you're having that discussion, the driver's report is going to be really important. A boat that's set up well should sail well. It should be very easy to sail. It shouldn't have to be a boat that you have to fight. So your driver should be reporting what they feel from the helm. Is the boat easy to drive? Does it have a wide groove? You know, have some dialogue points that you like to talk about to try and, you know, suss out what your boat feels like. Your trimmers, you guys should have notes about how you had the sail set up and what ranges you're working in. If you're living constantly maxed out on something, odds are there may be a setting that can give you more range to deal with puffs and lulls a little bit better. Crew, you guys should report on logistics. If it takes a certain amount of time to change a setup, you need to know that time frame. If it takes 5 minutes to change the rig setting and you have 3 minutes to go, you shouldn't change the rig. So have good notes about how long it takes for you to make a rig change. And everybody should be allowed to give some constructive input. You guys might be so focused on what you're doing that somebody else on your boat may have the opportunity to look around and see what the competition is up to. So be open to some constructive input from everybody on your boat. Getting results and making changes. It's really important at some point that you make a decision on your rig. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just pick a setting, write it down. And then if it works, you can keep that note and keep that setting for a long time. If it doesn't work, look back at your reference points, figure out where you are, what the conditions are, and make a change and go from there. And then rinse and repeat. Just keep doing that over and over and over again. You got to make a decision and you got to go for it, and then write down what the results were and make another good decision from there. At the end of the day, I always like to get my crew together and have a good debrief. Talk about what worked, what didn't. Have good notes. You can always reference your big notebook and go back to a setting on the water that you may have worked or did not work, and see if you were actually hitting the setting that you thought you were. So always having really good measurements, really repeatable settings, or at least something to check back against when you come back on off the water. So that's where this detailed off the water guide comes in handy, and being able to reference back against that and make notes. Sometimes you may find that you have made a consistent change over time from your base before you go sailing and what you consider your base condition. It may be time to update your base and update your guide. So have those notes, talk about them all the time. And then at the end of the day, I always like to go back to base. Go back to where you started, start the day fresh, and continue that good note ritual. I hope you enjoyed that pro tutorial, and we'll see you out there on the water.